It's nice to be here with you all. Let's take a moment and just close our eyes and give ourselves permission to arrive here fully, connecting to that which is good, that which is true, and that which is beautiful about your very nature. And so I'm going to encourage you just to take some deep, full breaths and compassionately noticing if there's any pain or heartache or confusion, and just breathing into that, gently embracing it. Softening around it and inviting a deeper presence of love to awaken from the very fabric of your being. So just taking deep, full belly breaths and softening with each breath, arriving here fully, giving yourself permission just to gently let go. If anything you've been tripping over or struggling with, you can even imagine just lifting it up, placing it at the feet of God. Saying, "Here, Lord, you take care of this." As you breathe and you feel and you melt, giving yourself permission to be a child of God. Breathing in and breathing out, softening, melting, letting go deeply and fully. And recognizing that which is awake, that which is alert, that which is intuitively intelligent right here, right now. That there is this spacious, silent presence which is good, true, and beautiful. So just melting a little more fully to this silent presence, this goodness. Even smiling a little bit about how lovely it feels to put down the drama of life, the busyness of life, the pain and struggle of being human, and just to arrive here. Yes. And again, any of you whose burden is heavy, lift it up. Place it at the feet of the Divine Mother. Let her have your pain, your suffering, your confusion. How you give yourself permission to return to your original nature, which is good and perfect, complete, whole, radiant, luminous. And so I'll ask you in this moment, can you feel your luminosity? right here, right now. Can you feel, can you experience directly that which is quiet, radiant, and alive before thought? And I encourage you to give yourself credit for what you are. That you are a divine being, a holy being. This is what you are, a holy being. Just taking the backward step and melting into this quiet space of holiness. And so I encourage you to rest here now and forever. Just to rest here in your holiness, in your innate goodness. And so I'm going to shift a little bit and speak about this month's complicated schedule. um, it's just complicated because I'm traveling, and I like to be a very persistent and consistent fella. This month I'm going to be a little bit all over the place. And so, for the rest of this month, in regards to satsang, on June 13th and 20th, satsang will be on Zoom only. No Facebook live stream on the 13th or the 20th. As far as meditation, we're going to have meditation on Zoom June 16th and 30th. No meditation on the 9th of June and the 23rd of June. So in regards to the Kundalini support group, the next two groups, the 11th and the 18th, will be hosted by Neil within the Sangha. Those are for free, and a link to that is on the Kundalini support group Facebook page. And there'll be no group on the 25th because we will all be on retreat June 25 through 27. At least I hope you're all there. I hope you can all join us. Then the evening of the 27th, that will be the evening of the retreat. We'll have a Sunday satsang, and the schedule will return to normal after that. So I hope that's clear. All this is on the website, and so you can check in there, but basically keep showing up. And so this week I'd like to talk about persistence on the path. And one of the things that separated me in my relationship with my teacher is I was simply persistent and consistent. I just kept showing up day in and day out. And so for about 20 years, my teacher hosted a class every Wednesday night, Sunday morning, and I was there for all of them. For all of them. It was, this was back before COVID, and so we would literally show up if we had the flu. Like, that's how, if it was our birthday, if it was Christmas, we would show up. And when I say we, I mean me and my teacher. And there was others in the group who were, I'll say, fairly consistent, fairly persistent. And it wasn't that, I was, skilled in any way, more spiritual than the rest in the group. But I just kept showing up again and again and again. And I was listening this week to a man who's a jujitsu master speak about persistence on the path. And he brought up this term. His name's John Danaher. And I think he coined this term adaptive persistence. So you don't just want to show up in a dumb way where you're doing the same thing again and again and again. We want to show up in an adaptive way where we are looking at the path. We're looking what's working, what's not working. Like, why is this thing that I'm doing working? Why is this thing that I'm doing not working? Now, I found, I'll be kind of rude here, in the path of Buddhism, which I spent a lot of time sitting with, Buddhist groups, different Buddhist sanghas, and I came across many people who'd sat for 3 or 4 decades, when I'd met them. And, I'll just make a generalization here just to kind of drive home this point. A lot of these were just crusty old meditators. And they were meditating in the same way on day 1 as on day, 40,000 or whatever. And they weren't adapting in their practice. And so they were still kind of the same grumpy old man. I mean, they were maybe a little softer, a little bit more tender. And they kept showing up just like I did, but they weren't adapting. And because of this, nothing was really changing within them. They weren't growing. They weren't taking these massive leaps on the path. And, if you have a teacher who you're close with or a guide, if you have a really strong sangha or, spiritual friends, they can point out to you like, hey, what's working and what's not working. And so like within my sangha that I was in, I had my teacher and he could critique me, up and down and right and left and this way and that way. And sometimes it was very big shifts he would ask me to make in my practice. And sometimes very, very subtle, like very micro movements of how he wanted me to practice differently. And, I was always surprised, that sometimes he'd say, Craig, you're meditating a little bit too much in your head. And I'd take a deep breath and like inwardly, I'd say, no, I'm not. I'm including the body. I'd say that inwardly. I wouldn't say that out loud to him. And then, he'd look at me again and he'd say, yeah, I'm going to invite you, Craig, to meditate, in your feet. I could say something outrageous like that. I'd say, that's crazy. But of course, I gave it a try. And as I began to shift to meditating in the feet, I noticed my body just woke up, tenfold. So in the past, I had 90% awareness in the head, 10% in the body. He had me meditate, the bottoms of my feet and just feeling the energy of the feeling of the absolute in the feet, the bottoms of the feet. And just in that little shift, that little instruction, I felt the entire body begin to wake up in a huge way, a transformative way. And so, on the path, we want to have persistence. If we don't have persistence, we just won't get anywhere. So persistence is the willingness to show up again and again, and not to be moved by pain, not to be moved by desire, not to be moved by the chaos of life, just the wildness of life. I just made a rule when I was young that I would practice every day, for at least an hour. If you practice every day for an hour for 20 years, there's going to be a change within you. If you up the ante to 2 hours or 3 hours, and then eventually, we look at that and we say, okay, I've been practicing every day for 3 hours. Is this getting me what I want? And one of the things I began to question when I was practicing every day for 3 hours was I noticed I could have powerful experience during those 3 hours. But as soon as that 3 hours was done, I would pick up my work mind again. And I would just jump fully into my egoic nature. And so then I had to look at, well, is 3 hours enough? I could up it to 4 hours. But when I could step back and actually look, well, what do I truly want? So here's where I'm adapting. And not just, raising the bar with hours of meditation. It's adapting and looking at, well, what do I want? I wanted to know what it meant to be free through and throughout, not just on a meditation cushion, but in real life, in the real world. And this brought my practice a little bit differently. I continued to meditate, of course, but I would also go to therapy. I would also receive body work, chiropractics, acupuncture. Started to study psychology because I realized that my psychological nature was veiling so much of my divinity. I said, oh, I can't just meditate my psychological nature away. I have to adapt and study psychology and see what my wound is, what my shadow is. Of course, spent many years working on that. And then adapting more of a tantric path where psychology and spirituality become one, where you see that your psychological nature is that which veils your divine nature. And when you lift the veils, the psychological nature then can become a manifestation of the divine nature. And so it's important for us to be adaptive on the path. What is working for you? If it's working, we continue doing it, we do more of it. And that which isn't working, I don't encourage you to stop it right away, but to look and say, well, why isn't it working? A lot of people have told me, Craig, I've done loads of therapy and it didn't do anything. And so I investigate that with them a little bit. I say, okay, well, how much therapy have you been to? I went 3 or 4 different times to 3 or 4 different people. I said, oh, okay, that's not loads of therapy. That means you just kind of stepped in someone's office for, 3 different people's office for 3 different hours. And you're not going to get far with that type of persistence. You need to find someone you trust and to dive deep with. I've tried this path, Craig, and I've tried that path, and I've done this and I've done that. It's okay. Like if you've read one book on Buddhism, that doesn't mean you've tried that path. But if you spend a couple years studying, if you've been on, a handful of 10-day retreats, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we've divin deep here. We dove deep here. Okay, we can cross that off the list. You're not a Buddhist. It was helpful, but you needed something more than Vipassana. And so again, it's really important to ask, what am I doing right? What am I doing that's helpful? What am I doing that's not helpful? And with progress, like progressing on the path, oftentimes we're not going to see that in a day-to-day. If we're like tallying it up, like, did I progress today or not? Oftentimes I like to think seasonally or yearly. Like this year, am I more compassionate than I was last year? Am I kinder to myself? I feel more relaxed in the body? Is the nature of the mind more spacious and vast and free? And if we're getting a yes to these responses, that's good. That means we're doing something right. If we're saying, no, I feel like I'm beating my head against the wall, then, our adaptive persistence means we need to pull the carpet out from under us. See, what is it that I'm holding on to? Sometimes you're practicing perfectly, like you're showing up and you're doing the right practices, but you're holding on to really negative beliefs about yourself or have a deep core wound of unworthiness. And so, that's really slowing you down. And then maybe we need to do a different type of work to heal those things. And once that's healed, you go back to the same practice you were doing. And then you feel like you're on a rocket ship, like you're really getting somewhere. And so anyways, I think this is a good thing to investigate. Like a couple times a season. Like, how's this path going for me? Do I need to commit more deeply and fully? Most of us could say yes to that. Like, could I give more of myself to the path? Yeah, I probably could. Many of us give, too much time to the Netflix gods or the Hulu gods. We know these gods. The Twitter gods, what's the other one? The Instagram gods. And it's like, could I give that time to myself, to my heart? Could I do that? Of course I could. Of course I could. And for many of us, the reason we give ourselves to the Netflix gods or the Hulu gods is because our body needs downtime. Our body needs some rest time. And so this is a different way we can adapt. We can look at our body and say, oh, it's the end of the day. I feel fried. What do I need? Just asking your body, do I need yoga nidra right now? Or do I need to watch, the 12th season of Breaking Bad? Like, does my nervous system need Breaking Bad right now? Probably not. Does it need yoga nidra? Oh yeah, probably use that. Or maybe I just need to go outside and lay down and look up at the stars and call out to the Pleiadian Brotherhood or whoever it is that's out there. So anyways, just a fun fact. I think on the 25th or the 27th of June, I think that's during our retreat, the Pentagon is going to release the UFO report. So I'm excited to hear that, to see, what's out there, what we know, what we don't know. I can say just in a funny way, I was on a retreat once and saw 3 UFOs with a bunch of people on the retreat, and it was just amazing to see something that my mind couldn't put in a box. It was like a craft that shape-shifted, so it wasn't even something that my mind could grab a hold of. And again, just to have some fun here, is I think in our lifetime, we're going to begin to more fully realize that human beings aren't the most advanced beings out there, that there's far greater beings of light, just like there's far lesser beings, there's far greater beings too. And at some point, we're probably going to have some type of, more solid contact with them, instead of them just coming and swimming around in our oceans and flying through the space. And hopefully they'll come by and say hi. So anyways, thanks for humoring me for a moment here. All right. So looks like Justina has her hand raised. I want to see if I can unmute Justina. Hi, Justina, are you here?
Christina, are you? Yes, I am. Hi, Craig.
Hi.
Mm. So, I love UFOs too, so I enjoy that. uh, so I was going to ask about it's a question about the lineage, and I'm just curious, like, um, how one knows in this lineage when they're really part of the lineage, because in some other lineages, I've kind of dabbled in, not as strongly as this one, but some other lineages, they have like an initiation, and then you're like, oh, I'm definitely part of the lineage. But but yeah, I was just curious, and I have been doing this consistently for a little over 2 years, and yeah, I was just curious, like your insight about like how you know that you're like part of it and that like that is gracing you, that the
Yeah,
lineage is gracing you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a beautiful question. Um, so a lot of it has to do with, what I said a moment ago. Just if you keep showing up somewhere, eventually it becomes your home. Eventually it becomes your home. And so I'll just say a number of things. Like I've been to a lot of, I've been initiated, in a lot of different traditions and this and that. But what I found is like, say at the end of like a big Buddhist retreat, there could be uh, a ceremony at the end where you take your formal vows as a Buddhist and you commit yourself to this path. And I can remember looking out at the room and seeing all kinds of people who are real excited, to say, oh yes, now I am a Tibetan Buddhist, and you go through the ceremony. And then that might be their first and last retreat. That might be the first time they meditated, the last time. I've seen a lot of different yogis, who've initiated people into a tradition. I think TM's probably the most uh, notorious, for this. And I just say notorious because they just had such huge numbers, and they'd have an initiation ceremony that a lot of the people would never meditate again. And so with this tradition, it's not like there's a formal ceremony, but the formal experience is if the Divine Mother reaches out to you and chooses you, where you say yes to her and she says yes to you and makes a home in your body. And by your body, I mean in your presence. And what that means is you start opening to the grace, and eventually the way I've been speaking about it, say on the Wednesday night classes, when you open your crown chakra, you open your heart to what's here. It is very similar to hiking in a jungle. Like if you hike in a jungle, you need a machete. So you kind of got to like cut a path. And so when you choose to show up on Wednesday night or choose to show up consistently to this group, you're cutting a path, and it becomes a trail, it becomes, like an open door for grace to flow into you. And then eventually that grace, it doesn't become like an experience that just happens Wednesday night. It's something that's eternally flowing in you, and you'll feel it. You'll experience it. And sometimes, you can get lost in your ego and then just ask, like, is the Divine Mother here? And just check, okay, is my crown open? Oh, yes. And you feel that flow. And so if you're showing up, then yeah, like this is your lineage. I mean, you could be with Netflix God. You could be with the Netflix lineage right now, but you're not. You're here. You're here. And so, oftentimes our egoic mind or our spiritual superego It's like, which path is for me, and like, what's the right thing? But I just like to look at the body. Like, what is the body doing? The body's just showing up. And when the body just shows up, it's like the body has decided that this is what's important. And so you look at where do you spend your time? Where do you spend your attention? Now, if you're just coming here, for 2 hours a week, and then, you're spending 85 hours a week with a Tibetan Buddhist, then maybe you're a Tibetan, and maybe this is just a little side gig for you. But, you really have to feel into your heart and say, like, well, is this a priority? And so the more it's a priority, the more you become a part of this. And in a non-dual way, like when you listen to your heart, you're listening to the call of God. So lineage really chooses you. Like you don't choose it. Like me, like if I had an egoic choice, I would have chose something like really slick, like Zen Buddhism or something. But that wasn't my truth. It wasn't my truth. I mean, there's some truth there that I love Zen, but this lineage is just like grabbed a hold of me, like a python, and wouldn't let me go. Strangled me until me and it became one. And of course, that happens the further we walk this path. But something to look into as well, as you feel into yourself, just a good question to ask yourself is, well, I'm showing up, and so why am I questioning it? Because sometimes people, they show up to something really good, and they just doubt it. And, in that case, doubt is just a disease of the mind. And that's different than discerning, where, it's like, well, do I want to be a priest or do I want to be a monk? You have to feel into yourself, how do I really want to serve? Versus doubt is just something that sabotages you on the path. And so you might just try it on a little more fully and ask, well, who would I be without doubt? Or who would I be without this questioning? The other thing that I like to look at with lineage, and something my teacher told me, is he said, like a lot of times you can go be a part of some great lineage, but there's no teacher there. Like the teacher came 2,000 years ago and then they died. And so it's like, okay, like that's, there might be a lot of energy behind that lineage, but there's something different that happens when there's like an active lineage holder who you can meet with, who you can speak with, who you can interact with, who can transmit the power, the grace. And so my teacher always told me, look for that, Craig, because many traditions, a lot of times modern day Buddhism as taught in the West, it really lacks juice, it lacks fire. And so you're kind of just left alone. And the juice and the fire you get is if you go do a 10-day retreat, but then the rest of the year, you're like, oh, it's just me and, some old book that was written a long time ago. And so anyways, Justina, was that helpful? Yeah, go ahead. I'll say this about you, Justina, you have the right type of heart to be here. Like you're in a good place. This is a good place for you. And you have the right type of sincerity. And so that's a good thing. So there's something here that's aligning. And I encourage you to trust that more fully than your mind, and And sometimes lineage is just a conversation with God where you say, hello, God, through this doorway, through this window, and see if God responds back. Like I love the tradition of Islam, but I can never, I just don't feel much there. I just feel warm radiance, but I don't feel it call to me in a deep way. And I'll definitely go and hang out and meditate in the mosque, but the teachings don't connect so fully with me. And so there's something warm there, there's something good there. Like I was in London and went to the big mosque. I felt just a wonderful power and grace there. But nothing like really stirred me to pick up the Quran. And so just to have a conversation, like I may say, hey Muhammad, like what's the deal? And Muhammad might just smile back, but no, we're not going to do much business this lifetime. Or as you call upon the Divine Mother and you feel your heart flooded with grace, it's like, oh yeah, there's something here, something happening here. So I'm going to give of myself more fully and explore this path more fully. So anyways, beautiful question. All right, let's hear from Richard.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi Richard.
Hey, hi there. I see that Kyle has a question in the chat, and just because I ask a question every week, I'd love to wait. You can come back around to me. We'll get Kyle answered first.
Okay, well, let's just do you because we have you on the mic here.
You sure? Okay, great.
I'll circle back to Kyle. I have to.
I love that.
Thanks for reminding me. I have to figure out where that chat is. Okay, yeah. So I'll meet with you, Richard, and I'll come back to Kyle.
Lovely. Okay. I wanted to ask two things. One of them is also lineage related. Solazuma is a name that you use to refer to Hilda.
Yeah.
And I found a ridiculously beautiful article. I didn't find it. Taylor did. Do you know who Larry Heisler is?
I don't. Larry Heisler.
That's okay. So Larry Heisler was a musician for Hilda, and he wrote a song spontaneously that had the name Lazuma in it. And he didn't know where it came from. But one day, okay, great.
So
one day he played it, and
that,
she blasted out.
Yeah, so I've sung the song probably 1,000 times.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm sure that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I won't go into that. It was a beautiful article. I put it in the chat. It just I feel so much more, not just connected to Hilda, but like the power of that name really speaks to me now with that context. I would love to hear a little bit about that from you. But then my second question has to do with, so I've recently kind of been drawn into the desert fathers and mothers in Christianity.
Yeah.
And Christ came to me and said, hey, you need to come into the desert. You need to come into the desert. And in honor of that, I'm kind of doing this 40-day stint kind of thing. It's like Lent, but not in Lent. I'm not going to get into that. What I would be curious about, though, is coming from you, because you do have intimacy with the Christian tradition, and you also like to talk about going into the desert. Like, what does that mean to you? What does it mean to go into the desert? So great. Those are my questions.
Yeah. Okay. Those are two big questions there. So I'll start with the second one first. So the first time I came out west, I was just utterly shocked about how expansive the desert is. And it's expansive in a very, I'll just say, dry type of way. And so it's a similar feeling as the ocean, but the ocean has almost like a rumbling power to it and a force of radical aliveness. But the desert, it just feels so empty and pristine. And my whole life, I just suffered from having too much in my head, too much emotion, too much thought. And I can remember just driving across the desert for the first time. And I had this vision of myself, just almost like sitting out in the middle of the desert, almost like levitating maybe a couple feet above the desert. And I just saw my body just explode into light and into emptiness. And in that moment, I felt how nurturing it was to be no one, with no thing, with no thought, no personality, no struggle, no fight, no thought, just none of that psychological nature. And so I had this vision. I was quite young. I was probably only 19. And I just met my teacher, and for me, that's what a lot of my meditation practice was about, was just emptying out. And giving oneself permission to fade into radical emptiness and to experience the exquisite freedom of just merging, of just like dissolving completely and utterly. And so for me, the desert has been such a gift. I mean, we live in such a busy way. And, I'm always shocked at, you know, people, how much time they spend on their phones and how terrified they feel if they lose their phone or put the thing down or don't have it attached to their body. And so the desert is, it's like the opposite of being hooked up, to the phone or the internet or something with all this information coming to you. In the desert, a lot of times there's just nothing there, nothing for the mind to attach to grasp at. Uh, it's so utterly devoid of drama. That's in a sense what the desert is like. Nothing is happening. Nothing. If you're lucky, there'll be some clouds that will float through the sky. But beyond that, there's not much going on in the desert. And especially like where I go in the desert, you can see geological time. So you can see, I don't know, maybe hundreds of millions of years of geology. And that's radically humbling to the human psyche. The human psyche is like, oh, I'm an Instagram whatever, and I have 10 million viewers and this and that, and I'm my image and I'm important. But when you go out into the desert, you realize, no, I'm a speck of dust. I'm a grain of sand. And I don't mean that in an unworthiness way, but just in the context of the infinite. And yet simultaneously, as you let yourself be a speck of dust, a grain of sand, there's this eternal nature that wakes up and realizes that I am that, like I am all of that which I see, all of life. And the dinosaurs and the 12 times the oceans have flowed through this desert, and the dryness and the sky and the stars, and I am life, I am eternity. And that's one of the immense gifts the desert has brought for me, is a sense of radical humility like a humility for the human self, but also when you ride the wave of humility in the divine self, what it means to be humble in a divine way is it's you stepping into, you owning what you are, you being what you are, you realizing what you are. That I am the desert, I am the hugeness of the sky, I am the blueness of the sky and the redness of the dirt, and the emptiness of time and the fullness of time. And so, again, like I spend a lot of time in the desert, and a beautiful thing, like go way out in the desert, there's no cell signal because there's no people, because Verizon's not going to pay money to pump, cell service into a place where there's nothing happening. And so I love about it is you can't even connect, to that thing, but you can connect to everything and no thing. And that's one of the things the desert can give you is everything and no thing. Everything and no thing. And so anyways, I encourage everyone to spend time in nature. To spend time in nature. I mean, nature is meditation. Nature is consciousness. Nature is silence, stillness. Nature is light. Nature is radiance. To go out, to spend time in nature, and to melt into that which you are, that which is the fabric of your being. And so anyways, I go on, professing my love, my profound gratitude for the desert. And the desert is just synonymous with, in a sense, like a monastic path, the path of neti, just the path of just letting go. And so it's helpful, for all of us to unhook and to step out fully and let life teach you from the inside out. From the inside out. Okay, so seeing some more questions, but I better. So you asked me something about Hilda. Let me see if I can pull that question out of the air. One of the things that Hilda brought, like Lazuma, is basically, is very similar to the energy of Skanda, which is brilliant, overwhelming light. And Lazuma, it comes with such a sweetness to her. It's like the absolute, so it's like the absolute, like right on the edge of the absolute. So it's like you're almost ready to dissolve into the absolute in the form of light. And so a moment ago I was speaking about absolute in the form of emptiness. But Lazuma is the absolute in the form of light, just radiant brilliance that can literally burn you up. Like literally burn up your karma, burn up your fight, your struggle, your resistance. But it also has, Hilda also comes with this sweet nectar, and the nectar of what might be called Amrita. And so, I can remember my teacher David, he had Hilda sari, and for each retreat, he'd put out a seat for Hilda, and then we would like drape her sari over the seat. And after the retreat, just one of the, actually many of the retreats, he'd say, Craig, I need you to go fold up Hilda's sari. And, Hilda, had passed on many years before. But just touching her sari, I could just feel like just this warm Amrita just pouring out of it, flowing out of it. Such a grace just to fold her sari. and just to feel that warmth, to feel that just such an immense love. And she was serious too. There was no nonsense with Hilda. Like she was, could be incredibly stern. But, I mean, that's how masters are, often incredibly stern, yet ridiculously sweet. And the amrita can just flow from their being. And so, like he would call upon Lazuma. And as she'd come into the room again, it would be the light of Hilda is so brilliant that literally be uncomfortable. Because like I've said this often, that I would look at the door, I'd look at the clock saying, when is this going to end? It was like the intensity of the light. It's like something I was totally in love with, but also something that it's like the physicality of my body couldn't handle, because there was such denseness and karma within my system. And people would faint, like people would faint in her presence. I saw a couple of people fainted in my teacher's presence, teacher David's presence, but with Hilda, it was pretty common. People would hit the floor because the light would be so bright. So anyways, thanks, Richard, for having me share. Yeah, let me see if I can get to Kyle's question here. Hi, Craig. I'm curious as to why in the meditations we do not purposefully open up to Christ. You've mentioned that you have frequently opened to Christ throughout your path, and there is a powerful light there. Thanks. Yeah, Kyle. So basically, I'm at the mercy of God, in this moment, and in, during the Wednesday meditation. So I just follow the lead of who comes. So it's not really that I'm calling on Skanda, or calling upon Christ, or calling upon Hilda or Yogi Ram. It's more that they're coming into the room, alerting me of their presence, and then I just basically name what's happening. And so the energy of Christ has come a number of times, and maybe you just weren't there that evening, or maybe there's just something in your heart that's saying, yeah, I'd like more connection with Christ. And oftentimes the way what comes to me more often than say Jesus Christ is the Christ. The Christ consciousness will come, and I'll feel that, and I'll call that forward. Basically, what I'm doing is bringing everyone in the group's attention to what's happening, and to see if something can wake up in them, wake up in you all, and connect to what's here. And so keep showing up, Kyle. With say Jesus, the ascended master, so much of Jesus has, in my relationship with him, has just merged into an absolute. Whereas with different masters, sometimes they'll still hold on to like their subtle body as they appear before me. I'm not sure if that makes sense or not, but you can always put in a request. And that goes back to that lineage question I was speaking about with Justina, is like, if you want a relationship with God, call out God's name. Call out God's name. And so Christ, you've been called. You've been called. And so we welcome you forward. And even as I say that, I can just feel just the subtle energetics, change. For me, I experience the absolute, like I was speaking with Richard, in so many different ways, so many different flavors. Absolute in the form of Lazuma, in this moment in the form of Christ consciousness. Other times, and the form of emptiness. And so on this path, the further you open, the more these things will be shown to you. Be shown to you. So anyways, beautiful question. Okay, let's see. Let's hear from Kirsten. Kirsten, are you here?
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
So my question isn't as clear to me, but I feel I need to kind of muddle through it. I have been going through a period where a lot of emotional stuff has been surfacing, and I'm spending time with it, opening to it, but I want to make sure. I'm first of all having trouble distinguishing, am I just drowning in it, or am I really metabolizing it? And the other thing that's happened for me is, whereas I've always had a very gentle kundalini activity, in the past couple years it's been extremely gentle, to the point that I don't feel it happening very much at all, except I feel heat when I meditate at times. But other than that, it's so subtle. And yet there's a lot of emotional work that's been happening. So I guess there's two things. One is a kind of like a need to feel kundalini or external markers that something's happening, that progress is happening. Like I find myself feeling relief when I see you in meditation moving your hands, because I feel, okay, something is happening, because there's such a like a clog of emotional things, and I don't have any feedback, any much clear feedback that things are moving.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about this a little bit. So, I'll say this: if energy's flowing, whether it's if you're having emotional releases or energetic openings, or just energy moving in any arena, you're doing something right. So basically, you're telling me those things are happening. Is that correct?
The heat happens, once or twice during meditation, and the emotional processing has been ongoing, and a lot of mindfulness around that in my day-to-day experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. And so let's just stick with the emotional part. So when you have lots of emotions flowing through you, and if we have a concern about drowning, we want to make sure we're stepping back and, like you said a moment ago, just having a clear sense of mindfulness. And we want to have a really healthy self-talk from the one who's awake, from the one who's mindful, to the one who's suffering. So I like to give the analogy of like being a good mother or a good father. And so if you're driving down the road and your kids are in a car seat, they're strapped in the back and they're screaming, and a good mother will tell the child, hey, sweetie, it's going to be okay. You're loved, you're supported. We're almost there. Like mommy will get you there. So there's good, healthy, positive self-talk. When we drowned, it's normally the kid is in the back seat screaming and mom is in the front seat screaming. And so then we don't have an adult in the room. We don't have a mindful one in the room. We don't have a Buddha in the room. We just have basically two lost souls, the inner child and the struggling adult. And so if ever it comes up the issue of drowning, we want to make sure we're having, just stepping back into more of a rational mind, a scientific mind, but also kind of a compassionate, mature adult mind. I can see clearly. I'm going through a big process right now. I'm releasing a lot. I'm going through a storm. I'm going to continue to breathe, to be kind to myself, feel the ground underneath my feet, and just trust that, okay, This is one of the seasons of life. And during this season, there's a lot of processing that's happening. And so you want to make sure you're not telling the child, we're drowning. Like, you know what's happening, kid? We're drowning. Mommy's drowning and you're drowning. We don't want to say that. We're going to say, no, I know what I'm doing. I'm healing. I've had a lot of suppressed emotion throughout my life. And so now I'm spending a season letting all that flow through me. Letting it flow through me, letting it empty out of me. And it's very important for the one who's traumatized or the one who's processing. It's very important that they can look to someone, look to an adult, and trust what's happening here. Like, what are we doing? Oh, we're going through a big process of letting go. Now, the people who try to do, say, trauma processing or releasing work, letting go of karma, whatever you want to call it, who don't have a strong, sane adult in the room, what happens is the inner child just becomes re-traumatized, and then the child's actually drowning. It's like, what's happening? I don't know what's happening. I feel like I'm going crazy. I am going crazy. I'm totally crazy. It's like, no. That's like, what's happening? I'm healing. And so one of the things that I did in my own experience, like I took the word like re-traumatized, drowning, struggling, suffering. Like I took those words out of my vocabulary and I just said, what's happening? I'm healing. Healing is messy, but I'm healing. That's what's happening here. I'm letting go. Letting go is messy, but I'm healing. I'm not re-traumatizing myself. I'm not drowning. I'm not struggling. I'm actually doing really good because I'm letting go of a lot of stuff at once. And so I fed myself, I fed my psyche good, positive self-talk. Because it's like if a kid's having a tantrum and you tell the kid that mommy's crazy, it's like the kid's just going to continue to have a tantrum and feel scared and feel like they can't trust and there's no ground under their feet. And so, it's important, this is where we are persistent and consistent with love and compassion and showing up and being mindful and also giving ourselves full permission to cry, to grieve, to release, and to let go. And a good question to ask is, like after you have a good cry, is, do I feel lighter? Do I feel lighter? If the answer is yes, you're doing something right. And you may not feel lighter, that day, but if you look back, like, do I feel lighter this month as opposed to last month? And your ego may say, no, I don't feel lighter. There's a lot more emotion just moving through me. It's like, okay, yeah, that is true. There is more emotion moving through me. But when you look deeply and you've released a lot of emotion, you realize, oh no, I do feel lighter. There's just a lot of emotion that's here. I do feel lighter. There's just a lot of emotion that's here. And you see that you're working through layers of grief, of sadness, of trauma, of pain, of confusion, or layers of samsara, however you label it. Okay, so that was one question. And the first question you had was about the energetics of awakening or what you're experiencing. And again, it's just basically, do I feel light? Do I feel energy in my body? Do I feel peace? Do I feel spaciousness? Do I feel love and radiance? And it's important to know like how to discern, like when we're processing a lot of emotional energy, for most people, because of the weight and the heaviness of emotions, it just veils every other experience. People are like, I'm having a bad day. It's the worst thing ever. And they're just, like just stuck in the heaviness. And one of the skills that I learned, again, this is my adaptive persistence. One of the skills I learned early on was how to have a dual experience where I could connect to peace and spaciousness, say mindfulness, and be like, oh my God, I am in so much pain. Like, like right now I am overwhelmed with light, but I'm also in a ridiculous amount of physical pain right now. Like I'm greatly suffering in physical pain, but I feel so much light that, in a sense, the light is overshadowing the physical pain. And for most people in the beginning, the physical pain or their emotional pain overshadows their divinity. And so, the ego listens to the loudest voice inside. So a lot of times, especially if you're drowning or feeling like you're drowning, it's important to acknowledge, like, yeah, there's a lot of energy releasing, a lot of energy flowing, moving, but it's happening in a container of spaciousness. There's so much space, there's so much peace here. That energy can flow, emotion can flow. In fact, like when we go back to that question, like, do I feel lighter? Like a lot of times when we're ridiculously repressed, we feel dense or we feel heavy or we just feel numbness or nothingness. But in order for emotion to actually move and release from our body, we have to be unrepressed. To be unrepressed is to be connected with the spaciousness. So repression is like, like this, squeezing everything down together, like in a pressurized can. When you're unrepressed, the mind, the body, like if emotion's flowing, you're unrepressed. And that means there is spaciousness here. There is freedom here. There's so much freedom. It's allowing emotion to unravel. And so it's important to train the mind to notice, like, oh yeah, there's a lot of space here. One of the silly things I used to do is I'd lay on the floor and literally have a panic attack. And I would notice, oh my God, like there's so much space in this room. Like there's so much space here. My body would be shaking, trembling, going through full blown, panic. But my mind was expansive and realized there was room for panic to unravel. There's lots of room. There's lots of space. And so to train yourself in seeing what is good here now, like what's good that's here right now. And it's important that we don't look to the loudest voice, because the loudest voice often is just the ego or the emotional nature. Say, like, I'm suffering. Well, who is it that's noticing that someone's suffering? Who is it that's hearing the scream of suffering? Who is it that's breathing into the suffering? Oh, yeah, like there's this holy presence here, breathing into suffering. Sometimes it can be helpful just to step back into that and emerge into that and to rest there for a little bit, and then to come back and to pick up the suffering and say, oh yeah, like I can do this. Whereas if we try to do psychological healing purely from our egoic psychology, that will only take us so far. That's a necessary step, but eventually we see that the egoic psychology is limited and can't really tend to all of our pain and wound. And we need to step back into our goddess nature, our angelic nature, and allow this nature to hold and heal us. And so anyways, I hope there was something there helpful. Yeah, good to see you. All right, I think I did my part pretty good with those questions. Let me look over here. Hi, Craig. Would you mind speaking on evil for a bit? I love the word evil. I've always thought of darkness and people as conditioning, but the concept of evil keeps coming up. Curious how you see it. Yeah. So I'll say this, just within, let's just say, human beings, there's no evil. But there is an animal nature and there is a tribal nature. And there could be really dark aspects of tribal nature. They can lead to wars and violence and genocide. And we could label that evil. But really what it is like when you look at the heart of anyone who commits violence, you see that they're greatly suffering, they're struggling, they're disconnected from their divinity. And so in a sense, that's what evil is to be really far, deeply disconnected from your divinity. It's like, I don't know who I am. I think I'm an animal. I think I'm a Chinese person. I have to hate the Taiwanese or whatever. I'm Tibetan and I have to, be against this group or that group. And that's just tribalism. It's just kind of animalistic behavior. And so there's that in humans. Now I will say this, through my years, just on the path, I've seen that there are some very dark realms. And I don't like to think of them as evil. I like to think of them more as confused. Just realms that are really far away from God consciousness. And there can be entities and kind of vicious beings and vampire kind of creatures and this type of thing. I don't like talking about it too much because then people start dwelling on it. But there's beings of great light and there's beings of, I'll say minuscule light, minuscule. And the ones of minuscule light, just like human beings who have minuscule light, their consciousness, they need more love, not less. They need love, they need strength, they need discipline. They need support. They need support. So anyways, I don't want to go too much into that because it can bring up some bizarre realms, but it's important not to be afraid of the lower realms, but it's just to see what it is. It's just confusion. Just like you and I can get confused sometimes. I get confused often. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's just my conditioning or my mind wasn't working or having an animal body. It just got confused, I thought I wanted that cake, but then I realized I don't. Okay, here's the question. Hi, Craig. I was drowning, but not anymore. Thank you for helping when I was drowning. Okay, yeah, you're welcome. We'll praise God, for the support. We'll praise God. Thanks for showing up, Colleen. Okay, let me just look here. I think one more question popped up. Hi, Craig. I seem to having been born as what I later came to know as a highly sensitive, empathetic person and likely highly gifted. I like this. Okay. That's probably most people in the Sangha. I never felt understood. My whole body, mind seemed to function quite different compared to many people around me. It took me a long time to figure that part out. It has been extremely rough for me on planet Earth. I have been transferred by heaven from early on that I am here to bring light and a piece of heaven to earth, that I consciously choose to incarnate into this age, especially my family surroundings. Much later, I was being shown my purpose from spirit to be a bridge between dimensions, form a holistic, intuitive, psychological, physically health-based healer. All right. Let's see what's going on here with this. Okay. Through my surroundings, though, I have been taught inherent unworthiness and mistrust in my perception. And so let me stop you here. So this is a very common path, a very common archetypal journey. The same thing happened to me. Whereas we were these really highly sensitive beings. And normally what a highly sensitive being means is it means you came from a very high heaven world. So a heaven realm that's very close to the absolute. And so in those realms, everything is, it's like exquisite light. And so when you incarnate down into this world, which is a very dense world, you know, where we're talking about things like evil in the last question, it's like there's a lot of denseness in this world. And so when you go from brilliance into denseness, it's rough on your energetic nervous system. It's incredibly rough, like it hurts, like it burns, like sometimes it might feel like, you know, you're being dipped into a vat of acid or something. It's just like, oh my God, like life on planet Earth. That's how it felt, you know, for me, most of my life as a kid. I was like, I was just so sensitive. I felt like I was growing up in such a rough family. Now, the reason that this type of being, which again will be most of us, is dropped down into a family system where you're kind of taught you're unworthy is because through the process of discovering your worthiness, through the process of you discovering your worthiness, you develop, you have sensitivity, but then sensitivity is coupled with strength, with power, with confidence. And so now you become an angel who can function here in the world, and you can actually bridge heaven and earth like you're describing. So it's a very common journey. It happens in so many spiritual people. They have this incredible brilliance. They're dropped down into planet Earth. They're not seen. They're not understood. They're oftentimes kicked to the side, or people are like, "What that? Why are you so sensitive? Something wrong with you?" And it's through that journey. It's an intelligent journey that actually God designs, where you learn to trust your voice, not the outward voices, you know, the culture, society, or the family system. You learn to trust in you. And as you trust in you, your light becomes strong in a grounded way that can actually affect change on planet Earth. And so for many of us, this is the journey of you being an angel and realizing how strong you are, how powerful you are. And for many of us, this is an evolutionary journey. So it's very uncomfortable. If you can imagine, like the first fish who started to come up out of water, become an amphibian, like the fish's gills, you know, his lungs burned. And so for highly sensitive people, oftentimes that's what it's like. It's like, oh my God. Like sometimes I meet people in the song and they tell me, Craig, I'm allergic to the sun. I'm like, okay, wow. Like that's a sensitivity to have where you're allergic to the sun, you know, and it's loud noises, the sounds, and smells, and just the harshness. And what's very important is that the highly sensitive one does not listen to the ego, because the ego will say, this world is too much for me. I need to go back to heaven now. And then we have a tantrum like a little child. It's important not to do that, but rather to say, God has sent me here on a mission to do great work. And in order to do great work, I have to first make it through boot camp. And so in boot camp, you discover your strength, your power. You discover that despite the roughness of this world, that your sensitivity cannot be harmed. Your purity cannot be destroyed or defiled. And so oftentimes life will spit in the face of the highly sensitive being. And it's important, you know, to wipe your face off and realize, oh, it's just saliva. It's kind of nasty, but it can't hurt me. It can't kill me. This light that I am cannot be put out. And so when the highly sensitive being discovers that, then we move more into the realm of being a bodhisattva, where we can actually affect change instead of just having a tantrum all the time that, you know, we're allergic to everything. You know, like, which most highly sensitive people are. They're just allergic to everything. And I laugh because, you know, that was me too. You know, I was allergic to everything. Didn't like loud noises and this and that. And, you know, didn't like anything. I just wanted to be in a cave and meditate, or, you know, I wanted to jump off a bridge and just wake up in heaven again. And God say, no, 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 I need you to be my warrior here on planet Earth. I need you to shine the light. I need you to nurse the one who feels unworthy. And discover that the one who feels unworthy, the one who feels like she's so beaten up, when you look at her, you see she's just as beautiful as the day she was born. Just as beautiful. This life did not tarnish your soul or your being. Okay. And so I will say this, for a lot of highly sensitive people, it's important before you just jump radically into boot camp that you step fully out of life for a period of time and just gently nurse your body into strength. Because what happens is when the nervous system gets so overwhelmed, it just gets like kind of like ridiculously, I'll use this word, panicky or panic ridden, and it needs downtime. That's why sensitive people are always wanting to be silent and quiet. But it's important that you go get some downtime and you recharge. And as you recharge, then after you've recharged fully, then it's important that you step into boot camp mode, where in a sense you're getting out your sword of light. And you're saying, I'm going to face all these challenges and not run from them. And prove your own worthiness to yourself. It's not about proving it to others, but to yourself. You realize, I cannot be burned. I cannot be harmed by this world. But for many of you, it's important that you first, step back and away. And so many people who go through this journey, oftentimes they have, it's almost like a dark night experience, but I'll say it differently, an empty night experience where they just need to go spend a year in the desert, or a year unplugging, or a couple months on retreat. And if you have kids and you're a busy mom and all this, you have to find a way where, like what I did, because I had kids, is I had to find a way where I could just quit my work and quit everything, but continue to parent. So basically parenting would happen in the summertime and after school and on the weekends, but then I could have 40 hours a week of just downtime of resting, nurturing the body. And again, for a season, for 6 months, for a year, building the body up, helping it to be strong. And when you go through a healing crisis and you love yourself and make yourself the most important person on planet Earth, that's how you heal unworthiness issues. That's how you build strength, is through you loving you fully and completely and doing everything you can to love the one within you. So anyways, I hope that was helpful. Okay. Well, a lot of comments in the chat. I just want to make sure we got everything. Okay, I think I did my part. So I want to say the schedule one more time for everyone, just to clarify it. So no meditation this Wednesday night, the 9th. I'll meditate in presence, but I won't be doing a live stream. No meditation the 23rd, but I will have a meditation the 16th. I'll be offering one, and the 30th. Satsang will be on Zoom, normal, uninterrupted. On Facebook, we will be missing the 13th and the 20th of this month. On June 25th, we're going to have a retreat. I'd love to see y'all there. And on the last night of the retreat, there'll be a satsang. There'll be the 27th. We'll be back to normal for the schedule, for as far as I can see. And so let's do this before we're done. I'm going to invite you all just to close your eyes and just to notice how much light is here. Let us acknowledge that we came together with open hearts, open minds, and just to notice how we are blessed with this light, this radiance flowing through you, and as you. And I encourage you to soak this light in with the intention that this light becomes permanent, a permanent experience. That this light, this brilliance, you begin to wake up and see that this is what you are. I am the light. I am the love. I am the radiance. Can you wake up and see this, acknowledge this, become this? Can you let go of any egoic walls? Any egoic walls? Any feelings of being less than? And say, no, I am divine. I am the Holy One. I am the light. Nothing makes God happier than when you step fully into your divinity. And if this meeting or this moment brought up any pain or sadness that you feel like is unbearable or too much, again, let us lift that up and give it. Give it to God. Say, Divine Mother, you take this. Lord, you take this. It's too much for me to handle. And on an exhale, just letting go of anything you don't need. And on the next inhale, stepping more fully into that which you are. So much love to each and every one of you. I thank you all for your generous donations and your support. My heart is with you. Good night, everyone. Bye for now.